welcome to another episode of Influencing Safety with Bill Martin, the president and CEO of Think Tank Project, LLC. I'm Kate Wade, the editor of Incident Prevention Magazine, and your host for this podcast. Recently, Bill posed a couple of very interesting questions to me. He asked me, is safety truly our industry's first priority? And is safety even a thing that actually exists? My response was to invite him to do this podcast recording with me today. So we're both here to explore those two complex questions with the hopes that doing so will spark further industry conversations. And with all that being said, I'd like to welcome Bill back to the show. Welcome, Bill. How's it going today?
Great, Kate.
My bird Levi is upstairs screaming at us while we were...
Hopefully my dogs won't bark. My dogs are hanging out. It's going to be 5 degrees today, so they're here with me.
They looked pretty sleepy when I saw them, so...
I appreciate what you're doing for the industry, Kate. I have a white paper that I printed it's not published, but at the end, if you want to share my email with anybody and they want to just sit down with this white paper in group discussion in their own place and let them, it's designed to create an engaged discussion, which has some other magic of itself,
We'll definitely add your email to the description of this so that people can reach out if they want to check that out.
Yeah, I'll just send it to them, and I don't have any expectation of whether they agree or disagree. It's the discussion that's important, and that's why we're here today, I think.
Well, yeah, I guess I wanted to kick things off by just diving right into the first question that you posed to me a few weeks ago. Is safety truly our industry's first priority? You said to me you're not even sure safety is an actual thing that exists. So can you talk to me about how, can it be a priority if it's not a thing that exists? And can you kind of explain what you mean when you say it's not a thing that exists? Because like in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm thinking of it as like maybe you're saying it's like a byproduct of other things, or can you just kind of expound on that?
Can I do a disclaimer first?
Absolutely.
Timothy R. Clark wrote the 4 stages of psychological safety, right? It's included safe to learn, safe to contribute. The last one is safe to challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
So what I would like people to recognize is when they start hearing some things that maybe they haven't thought of before, it's not familiar. When it's not familiar, it tends to put us in defense. It's called defend mode. And defend mode isn't as productive as discover mode. It's 2 different neurochemicals, and we won't go there. That's maybe another podcast. But today we're going to challenge the status quo, and we're not picking sides here. It's a question, and I may give some basis for my thoughts, but what's important is that the listener today listen to it, right? And there's just another book we've talked about, Radical Candor. Radical candor isn't when you can the first version of that, the author states in the second version, that some people took a license that they can just be rude and crude and disagree with people. And that's not what radical candor is. Radical candor is when it's safe enough to dispute things so we can have the discussion. Right? So now I forgot what you asked me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I was asking, I asked if safety is truly our industry's first priority. And you had said to me, you're not even sure that safety is an actual thing that exists. So how can it be a priority if it doesn't exist? That's, I guess, one of the things to talk about. And then if it's not a thing that exists, or at least not in the way that we talk about it typically, do you see it as a byproduct of like interactions between people, or, I think you understand what I'm asking.
Oh, so I have. So let's look at Incident Prevention Magazine.
Oh boy, yes.
That was a newsletter. All right.
Back in the day, yeah, it was.
And it became a newsletter. Now now you have like 3 magazines, I think, that you're doing.
Yeah, we've got 3 different ones in the company. Yes.
So Incident Prevention, and then you have podcast series and conferences.
Yep.
And they're all based on incident prevention.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow we have determined that safety is the first priority for incident prevention.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not our fault. Like I often say to people, if you speak English, you landed in English, right? One of 7,139 languages you could be speaking right now that your brain interprets, right? So if you look at things in objective reality, in what is, what is, I mean, we don't argue gravity usually,
Not usually, no.
right? And sunlight and those things. So there's certain things, regardless of the social constructed beliefs we have, which are, I mean, people are all welcome to believe across this big planet whatever they want. It's kind of a cool place where you can, and it's not. I recently asked a fairly large group of utility workers, asked, raise your hand if your parents were lawyers. And do you know nobody raised their hand? So a lot of where we are, what we become, is based on heredity, our genetics, as you mentioned earlier. There's a long, big wave of invisible things pushing us in directions, but they're invisible. So when we choose safety, so this is a hard concept for people to think about, but let's look at what I did with an emergency squad. We had an emergency squad back in '99. I was a paramedic, and the fire company kicked us out because we weren't meeting our quotas. So there's 19 members. They gave us 2 ambulances and no money. So then I talked to the village about giving them some money, and they said they give us a little, because this town supervisor was an officer on the fire department, so they didn't really like us. But once we formed, I was riding as a paramedic and as the CEO. And when I'm riding, I started asking the membership, so what's our first priority on this ambulance? I'm just curious. I'm looking for core values. And they said, ultimately, because I wrote down all the answers. There's only 19 of us, wasn't that hard, right? Ultimately, it was not safety as our first priority. Our first priority wasn't our our first priority was our patients. It's an emergency squad.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, so we've established the first core value. Our patients are our first priority. This is what you believe, and everything we do will have to do with that. What's our greatest asset? Is it the new ambulance, the new $25,000 defibrillator, monitor? And they said, no, our members are our greatest asset. Okay, when what you establish in belief in core value is true, it sticks. In the book Built to Last, they actually established core values that averaged, the 18 most visionary companies in our country established core values that lasted an average of 92 years.
Which is a long freaking time.
So that means those companies back in the day when it was written in 1994 didn't change their mission statement and their core values through wars and depressions. A lot of external force.
Yeah.
So if you Google Warrensburg Emergency Medical Services right now, it comes a faded picture of an ambulance in the background in a scene. And the first 2 lines are our members, our patients are our first priority, and our members are our greatest asset. Notice it didn't say safety.
Right.
So let's think about that. So let's just look at this logically. If we have a work or a company, let's say you have a company that's writing magazines. Oh, you do.
What a
So
coincidence.
company that's writing magazines, and you have employees. And this relationship between the employees and the company is a transaction that produces magazines and things to make the company successful, so it can produce more magazines to help steer our industry. Is that a fair description?
Yes, I think so.
So I'm calling it a transaction because everything is a transaction. We don't do anything by ourselves. When you want to buy coffee, it's a transaction between you, the money, the coffee, and the clerk. Remove part of that transaction, you don't get coffee.
Well, I mean, unless you don't want to pay for it.
Right.
You just you just run out of the Starbies.
Right. Right. So if an IP is successful based on the transaction between your employees, the work you do, and the company. Remove any part of that transaction, and there's no company and no employees. Am I right?
No. And I think you have to, and I think about it in terms of stakeholders too. It's like, we basically have like 3 sets of stakeholders. It's our employees, our readers, and our advertisers. And sometimes this doesn't always sound popular to people, but I say the employees are like the first set of priority, right? Because without them, we don't have a company that we can run, that we can produce anything. And then our readers are our next priority because we want to disseminate this information to them to help them stay safe, develop professionally, that sort of thing. And then our advertisers are after that, because in theory, if we have a good company and we're delivering good information to our readers, then advertisers will want to advertise in our publications because of our reputation and what we provide to the industry.
So you create a whole network to propel the the business and the workers. So without the business, there's no workers. Without the workers, there's no business.
Right.
So let's leave that one. I just flew United, and in they're reading, the steward was reading the things on the airplane, and he says, at United, safety is our first priority. And I just found that interesting because without passengers,
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't be a United.
Right.
So in my mind, just like the emergency squad, where their patients are first priority, if you're running an airline, safety is hugely important. And the people with degrees in safety, I'm not undermining or lowering them at all.
Yeah.
They can greatly improve outcomes based on safety being an objective.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But safety arrives as a result of the transaction between the company, the work, and the employee. That's logic. And for an airline to think that safety is the first priority, they can be really safe by not flying, right?
Well, yeah, stay on the ground.
So if safety was their first priority, they'd just stay on the ground. But in order to have a business, their clients and their passengers are their first priority.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not telling them that. And then actually, when my flight got canceled, that was obvious that I was not their first priority. Well,
Exactly.
right. So what if we work on the relationship between the company, the work, and the workers? If that relationship actually creates a product that is safe, and I don't even like the word unsafe. There's really expected and unexpected and unwanted outcomes. And when you get an unexpected unwanted outcome, that's not the outcome you wanted. So how did we see that working out? What would we do to get a different outcome? That's really, we spend a lot of time, because safety is our first priority, and analyzing, investigating, and spending a lot of time, and which turns into a lot of rationalization and justification, because we ask even 5 whys. By the time you get to the 5th why, I knew linemen that called in sick the next day just so they wouldn't have to answer that, right? Because every time I ask you why, we think it's like when we're a child, we want to be curious. It's why, but it doesn't turn out that way, because the difference between banter and ridicule is a fine line.
Absolutely.
Between asking your why for being an editor and why the hell did you write it? Did you post that article? One is going to say, well, you're going to go to defense, right? So let's get into a little bit here, Kate. I wasn't going to go this far, but I'm going to.
Let's do it.
Defend mode or discover mode. If I'm in discover mode, I'm thinking logic, reason, and intuition. I'm trying to move forward. How did that happen? What will I do to get a better outcome? But if I say, why the heck did you do that? And what were you thinking? Then now you're in justification, rationalization mode, which is defend mode. Problem with that, evolutionarily, that's our protective mode. And in evolutionary protective mode, we're strong and fast, but not super bright, because it bypasses our frontal lobe where critical thinking and executive function live. And everybody that's listening right now has made a mistake when they were either angry, frustrated, anxious, or scared. Because in protective mode, it's to save us. We don't want to have time to be thinking creatively, right? And actually, even Wagner Dodge in the Man Gulch fire back in 1949 created a backfire to lay in to keep from dying, although 13 of his crew didn't recognize that was a thing, so they didn't do it.
Yeah.
That's called a desperation insight, creative desperation insight. And that shows up like a flashbulb thing, and it's a new idea, but it makes sense at the time. But if you don't create a relationship with your team, they can't make sense of it. So 13 of his team died because they wouldn't. He lived through the fire.
Well, and I think that's what I was saying about a byproduct, right? Like safety being a byproduct. Like when you make a priority of people being a real team, and finding ways to connect them so that they know each other, they depend on each other, they trust each other. When you are connected with people and you understand them, it's like, we all have a friend probably who, like my best friend, somebody that you can kind of just look at them and they know what you're thinking. But that's not something that happens, just out of nowhere. Like you worked with somebody for a month, like you have to put time and focus, um, and prioritize those relationships. And then when you get people who work together, they can come up with those ideas that are bigger than and better than themselves. And that's how safety ends up, you know, being the byproduct. It's like we're working together. We know each other really well. There's a less likelihood of something bad happening because we're all paying attention to each other.
So I love that. So look at different gauges of what you just talked about. When you're connected, like with your partner you live with,
Yep.
one tone on the phone and what's wrong? You translate what's going on between you much faster at a deeper level when you're connected better. So,
Yeah.
so you mentioned the word team. So safety is a concept. All right. It's not a tangible action. It's a byproduct of systems, relationships, and behaviors.
Do you think everybody that's listening to this would agree with you?
No, of course not, because and it's not our fault. We've been programmed to think safety first. Safety is the first priority. I even went online and there's 1,000 safety first signs, right? It's not our fault. So there's a quote that says we get what we aim at, right? And what we see is determined by what we aim at. So if the invisible gorilla on the basketball court, it's Daniel Simon's experiment,
Yeah.
where he says there's a team in white and there's another team, and he says, count how many passes the team in white makes. And then he says, well, it was 13. And you're like, all right. And they say, but did you see the moonwalking bear? No, because you weren't aimed at the bear. You were aimed at counting. So right in front of you in the TV screen, a person in a gorilla suit moonwalks right through the basketball court. But because they don't block any of the passes.
I know. I didn't see it. They did that. They showed that video in one of my master's classes, and I literally did not see the gorilla.
It's called inattentional blindness. It's not our fault. It's just how we're designed.
Mhm.
The part of your eye that's in focus is the one we're looking at right now. And it has a little tiny spot in your retina. Everything else is blurry. So the thing we aim at is the thing that's in focus. If we're aimed at safety, right? Maybe we're missing that communication, connection, and competency arise from the team. If we focus on competency, so I'll give you another. I'm climbing Mount Kenya for the 4th time. This is a very difficult climb that I haven't done. There's 3 peaks there. It's in Africa.
Are you going next month?
June.
Oh, for some reason I thought it was in February. And I was
2024. I went in February. It was a different reason. That was a social experiment. We'd have to do a podcast for that one too. Okay. But a friend of mine called that I climbed all over the world with, and he said, "Hey, I'm sorry I couldn't go on that one, but we need to do this route. The north route up Bation, Bation, IAN is the peak, 17,120 feet." He said, "There's a north route. I'd really like to do that." And I said, "Well, we better hurry up." He says, "Well, why?" I said, "Because you're a year older than me." Right?
It's ticking. Yeah.
So safety is I'm interested in safety in this climb, but it's not my priority. My priority is competence and communication, because we're going to have our own separate rock climbing guide to try to do it quickly, because it's going to be like 11 or 12-hour climb, and we'd prefer not to sleep on the mountain or to hit the top and come down like the 15 or 20 rappel stations.
Yeah.
It also takes 5 days to get there because you have to acclimatize because it's so high. So safety will be a product of good teamwork, a good connection, and competent climbers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not aimed at safety because safety doesn't exist without that, right? I mean,
But you also have like a backup plan though, right? You've got like insurance or whatever through a company.
So there you go. Right. So global rescue, if something is unexpected and I'm on to get picked off of there with a helicopter, I get this insurance. I've used it at other times. I've never needed it.
Yep.
But that's plan B, right?
It's like the PPE, always have it on you, but never need it, right? Like David McPeak says.
I recently showed a picture for me, 100,000 years ago in a bucket next to another guy, 4 of us working on H-frame structure. And I'm in one bucket, my friend's in another bucket. There's 2 guys with climbing. And looking at the picture, you can see the extrinsic motivators, the thing that the safety requirements, right? We're all wearing hard hats, helmets, hard hats. And we're all wearing restraint devices in the bucket. We're all wearing FR clothing. There's ground sticks hanging. So you can see the visual compliance, right? Because because the safety part you can see. What you can't see is invisible. You can't see the relationship between us.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see what kind of dynamic is occurring on the pole. You can if you watch long enough, but you'll see the result of that, not the thing. The thing that is actually happening is invisible.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to make safety a visible thing, and then we have to do an incident analysis and then come up with lessons learned. But obviously, based on the statistics, our ability to translate all this great information, all the great conferences, all the great Danny Rains's and Jimmy Vaughn's, the guys who I wish had USB ports in their head so I could just learn what they could quickly. If all of that stuff doesn't seem to be translating to a change in what's happening, and then you can compound that because mental health is declining, right?
Well,
In
absolutely.
our
Yes.
industry, there's more. It's not just our industry; it's our whole world, right? So Kate, so if we're aimed at safety, are we missing the opportunity? So here's another thing: you're qualified, I'm qualified. That doesn't mean we're safe, because if you're
No.
qualified with 5 years and I'm qualified with 25, we have different levels of safe, and competence determines the amount of risk you'll take.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to
Typically it will.
right? Safety tries to paint everybody the same. We're not, and we never have been. And this is what worries me. While we're aimed at safety, we're missing the real thing that causes it, right? And the real thing is a team that's psychologically safe, that regardless of, you can believe something completely different than me.
Mm-hmm.
Because the power line we're going to build doesn't really care what we believe. It lives in physical reality, right? We can believe anything we want about, you can have different political beliefs, different religious beliefs, but we allow that to occupy cognitive space in our head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not working with you because of this. We allow that in our industry. And honestly, that affects mental health, it affects cognitive load, and in the end, makes the team interaction less safe.
Well, I was thinking recently, reading Radical Candor and just thinking about some different things. And, back in the day, and I mean, when I was younger, going to work meant that you were a professional in the sense that you didn't talk about like personal stuff. You kept a certain, like, I'm not the same person that I would necessarily be in an office that I am like at home or whatever. Um, and so I'm just curious if that professionalism thing is almost a hindrance in some environments, because what I've noticed about like our own company is the more years, like I've been here with incident prevention for 16 years, and over time, it's like people become sort of family if you've worked with them for long enough. And I can see that part of the growth of our company and the success that we've had is because of this like core group of people, right? And so we don't all have the same levels of experience. We don't all know the same kind of things, but when we come together, we enjoy each other so much and we know so much about each other that it's very easy for us to work together as a team and to do great things, even though that there aren't a lot of us. And I sometimes wonder, because we can have that radical candor, right? Like I can say to Nick, hey, blah, blah, blah. And he can say, Kate, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you're basically my brother. I'm not offended by what you said. Thank you for bringing it up. But I do wonder if in the workplace that, if people felt that psychological safety to be a little bit more relaxed, and, have a little bit of fun, even though it doesn't necessarily seem hyper professional, if that would help things at all. That was a very long-winded way to say all of that.
So no, that was really good. What you're talking about is intrinsic motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing you're talking about is the outcome, right?
Yeah.
This ability to talk to you. That's not the thing we need to do to get to have that outcome. That is the outcome, right? I did a slide recently of the view off my deck on a talk I was giving in the winter and a view off my deck in the summer. I have a really nice view off my deck. It's of a lake, and they're exactly the same water, the same mountains, the same trees, the same deck, but they look completely different in 2 different seasons. And when I ask people, what's different? Well, it's snow, there's winter and no leaves. And I say, yeah, so that's really interesting, because what we end up doing is it's called outcome bias. We end up focusing on the outcome. But the thing that created the change in seasons is invisible.
Mm-hmm.
It's that change in temperature not only changed the scene that we're looking at, it makes the decision for the clothes we wear and the activities we do. So what you're talking about, this when you came to work and you guys interacted, there's an invisible intrinsic force being molded that makes a different outcome, right?
Yeah.
And if we get what we aim at. If we started aiming at that, what you're talking about, that ability to team, right? Of a football team, when they're going to go on a play, every play they have a huddle. Nobody says, "Hey, dude, I'm not hanging out in this huddle this time. Finish the huddle, then I'll jump in the play." That doesn't happen, right? But I can tell you, the listening, you want to do something right now. Your listeners want to do something right now to create a better team. And at the end of your job brief, have a huddle. Share roles and concerns. There's a whole bunch of stories on that, right? But
Yeah.
that was Atul Gawande's book. There, for the activation phenomenon, it's practicing speaking up. It does a lot of things. But you go on a job site and you'll see these guys in a huddle, but the flagman won't be in it, and the tree trimmer won't be in it. That's over there, and the project manager happens to be on the job that day, won't be in it, and maybe the safety guy is watching from his truck, and then maybe there's a field crew coordinator. That's us. We need a huddle.
Mhm.
Now, two different football teams have different huddles because they're in competition.
Right.
We should not be in competition. We should all be involved in the same team. So this very simple thing right now, if you want to start creating synchrony and invite, I mean, the flaggers who are about to flag a pole transfer, who don't know what step potential is, could be standing under the very phase that you're transferring and have no clue what danger lies there. But if we start including them, we'll start to create collective intelligence. And then that flagger might say, "Hey, I'm a little worried about this because right about this time, there's supposed to be a parade coming through. Oh yeah, we better stop before that parade because we'll be right in the middle of this." But none of that happens, right? So this is kind of another long-winded way to say that if we're focused on safety is an outcome. We don't see the temperature change.
Right.
I'll just say a friend of mine when I was in Texas turned me onto this mineral water. I won't say what company it is. And then I come to Saranac Lake and I'm going to start drinking it because he said, our brains are 85% water and you should really have good minerals in that because the conductivity of your brain determines how fast it communicates with itself. And we already know if we drink enough beer, it screws it up, so we can make it better too, right?
Yeah.
They are to the mineral water, and I come in and 2 days later and that mineral water is on two people's desks. Not desks, tables at the cafe.
Yeah.
I'm not told about this mineral water in Texas and don't act on it. Nobody in my town is drinking it at that cafe. So the moral of the story is the thing that changes the outcome, right? So here's the other piece. You and I are working together, and while we're working, we have an incident, right? But what I don't know is that you weren't thinking clearly because you've defaulted on your kid's college tuition payment. And then you stop for coffee and somebody cuts you off and gave you the finger. And then somebody else bumped you out of the way. You spilled your coffee, you had to buy another coffee. And you have all this cognitive load ruminating in your head as you come to work. And maybe I had something going on too, but that will never come out in an investigation. There are a million, maybe an infinite number of pathways that things can happen in order for the event to happen. And what we do when we focus on after the event to prevent that thing from ever happening again, we think we can eliminate all those one at a time. It's helpful. We need to do the investigation. We need to do near-miss programs. But in order to have a near-miss program, it has to be a near-miss. In order to have an incident analysis, it has to be an incident. But if we create a team that's collaborates, connects, engaged, and competent, and that incident may never happen at all. Of course, we can't celebrate that because we won't know.
We won't know. But what I'm thinking is earlier you had mentioned mental health, and you and I talked about doing, like a mental health, like a separate podcast. But I really do think that there's a link here because what you're talking about is human connection. And I think part of, and I am not a doctor, but I am a person who's had mental health issues since I was a child, and I've been in and out of therapy and on different medications, and so I know a lot from what I've experienced. And when you are able to connect people who are, you're with your coworkers a lot, unless you work from home. But I think having that connection also helps. Not only you can recognize mental health issues in other people, but frankly, it just when you work in a place where you're happy to come to work and and love the people that you work with, that creates a family of its own. Like personally, like I'm estranged from my biological family, so my work family, I mean, these are people who are my family. And it has helped me when I've been, in dark times to have people that I know care about me, that I can lean on, who are going to ask and say, "Hey, are you okay?" Who make it comfortable and safe to share with them. Um, I really think that that is part of the problem in society today is, we talk about it all the time. We're so siloed from other people. There's a lot of disconnection. Um, I feel like you had said something once about how humans are the only ones that can be in a crowd of others like them and feel alone. Like if you're an animal, like a cow or a deer in a herd, they wouldn't feel alone. They're connected. So I just think this human connection piece is what we're missing. And certainly, like, safety is hugely important, and we should be doing all the things to not just comply, but to really have a robust safety environment in our workplaces. But we really have to get back to focusing on the human component because that's where that's the thing that matters the most.
So all the systems analysis, everything system we can design, every work process still run by humans so far.
Yep.
All of them, we're automating a lot of things, even driving, which is scaring the hell out of me, actually.
Yeah.
So, and-
Don't get me started on that.
but the mental health piece, I guess, does make sense, I guess, to make the connection while we're right here. So I just went to a birthday party for a friend. So I flew with the state police helicopter for 23 years, and this friend is a state police related guy. And one of the state troopers was there, and his son is been in the line series for 6 years. He topped out recently as a journeyman. And I said, "How's he doing?" He said, "You know what?" He said, he told me this. He says, he finally found, it took him a while. He finally found a good team of guys that he can work with. He said, because, there's a lot of guys out there that are, he says they're not, doesn't feel safe working with him because
Mhm.
for whatever reason, their behavior or their addiction, whatever it is, there's a bad dynamic. But he found some guys that he can sync with. And I didn't prime him for that. He used the word sync. In order for that conversation to even happen means it exists, right? So we've got this uneven thing going on in our industry, and it's not anybody's fault. It's what we've created in the industry, right? So let's go there. I'm not going to cite the studies. If anybody's interested, I'm happy to tell them at some other point. But there's proof that the environment you grow up in, whether physical or social, affects a part of your brain that inhibits growth in a certain part that makes you more susceptible to depression, personality disorders. And when you map it out and you get through all that stuff, it looks like this. If you're in a hierarchy, command and control, rule-based, compliance-based, then in order for you to succeed, you have to comply. That's extrinsic motivation. And we need a rule-based system. That's all good.
Yep.
But what we also need is an intrinsic motivation that we talked about earlier. Something, and everybody that's been on here has been with a team or a crew where it just, almost sudden it's 2:00, man. Where did the day go? You're just clicking. Everything clicks. You feel better. You go home better. Your wife doesn't say, "What the hell happened to you today?" We get home, right? And you might even be exhausted, but you don't know it because you're in that high energy state, right? Everybody who's listening has also been on a team or crew they couldn't wait to get off. So this isn't magic. We have to help those people we have to synchronize so we can find those people that are either toxic or disruptive, or the disruption that's causing this. And often when I go out to visit a crew, I say, "Look, let's get this straight. You guys work fine without me here. I am the disruption today. Don't let me distract you. So I would just want you to take an extra minute. If you're going to do something of any consequence while I'm here, Just take an extra minute, kind of like if you're checking the breech, if you're a shooter, checking the breech of your gun, you look away and look back in to make sure it's empty. If you're about to do something, just look away and look back. Give yourself that moment, or verbalize it to the other guy. I worked with a guy when I told you about that picture. I have 1,000 hours overtime in the air with that guy. You can't see that connection in the picture. All you see is the compliance piece that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't comply, you're punished, right? Or if this happened, there's a lot of blame and shame going on. They fire linemen. They become suddenly incompetent. They've been good their whole life. Now they work for a company because something went wrong. They fire them. And then they go back to work for another contractor on the same utility property, right? So there's a lot of lack of rational, of anything that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the model that I just described, hierarchy, rule-based compliance, it's the same as the military.
Yep.
The military is having a big mental health crisis. We call our apprenticeship a boot camp, right? So and that creates, I mean, the studies are there, that creates, hey, grunt, you will do what I tell you when I tell you. And the apprentices, the journeymen have to sign their books if they're a contractor. So they got to keep their mouth shut until they top out if they want their book signed, right? So it's created a compliance, rule-based environment that's proven to affect mental health. So was that too much, Kate? I don't know.
No, I don't think that was too much at all.
And so what's the solution? Let's talk about solutions.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was getting. It's like, what do we do? Because just for my own personal life, when it comes to mental health kind of stuff, there are typically no easy, fast solutions. So, if you're working with people who are kind of, depressed or anxious, or let's say, they're leaning on prescriptions or alcohol or something like that to kind of get through things. Yeah, because it's not a quick fix, like what are at least first steps that people can take to help themselves and others?
I think it's easier than we think.
Okay.
Monarch butterflies fly south, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they go down to Mexico.
And they all group together to fly south.
Yeah.
And how do they do that? They text each other, cell phone maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it does. So they're at this, there's a whole thing about frequency. They're at a certain frequency. Somehow they're communicating because they don't fly south with hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are at a different frequency, right? And birds don't fly south with loons.
No.
Unless the loon thinks it's a goose, right? We're all at different frequencies. So when we're at the same frequency, information travels better. And then we are designed from the same elements as them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we can create an engaged workforce, they start to synchronize at the same frequency. And I know this sounds magic. It's not. This is just how we're designed. I did it with.
Yeah.
I
think people know they have friends where, and it's what I was saying about my best friend earlier. It's like literally walking. Yeah. Like going in the car. She hasn't said anything. And I'm like, what's wrong? Because I can just, you can feel it in the air.
Right. And so I just did this demonstration on a video that somebody did on me. I have two tuning forks. And I could hit it if you want to hear it.
I think I'm okay.
Okay. So two tuning forks are at the same frequency. If I hit one and I silence it, the other one's still ringing. If I adjust the frequency, because I can put a little thing on one of them to change the tone slightly, and I hit this and silence it, the other one's not ringing at all.
This is like the quantum entanglement, right?
Right. Well, kind of. It's
sort of
basically frequencies. We call it resonating, right? Resonating frequencies. So when you watch a movie that you like, it resonates with you. When you hear music you like, it resonates with you. When you have a friend that's at the same frequency, you guys resonate. Now, when we have a disruption to that, it's distracting, uncomfortable. And then right now there's FM and AM radio frequencies around here. We can't hear it, but we can tune into it. Just because we can't hear it doesn't mean it's not there. Right. So I talked earlier about discover mode and defend mode. Mm-hmm. Defend mode is a different frequency than discover mode.
Yes.
And we can identify defend mode fairly easily because it's labeled by certain words and rationalization and justification. If I say something, if we're friends and we're bantering, then I suddenly cross the line to ridicule, I don't need you to tell me. I can feel it. Mm-hmm. I can feel it in there's a whole bunch of things that occur, from facial expressions to to tone, to body posture, right? And we were reading all these other things simultaneously. Verbal language, after all, is just vibrational sound frequency. And you don't hear words. I'm vibrating the air, which is vibrating your eardrums, and your brain is interpreting a waveform. And I just said our brain can interpret 7,139 waveforms and translate it to a language if that was needed because of where you landed. So what if we just start to recognize I'm a leader and I'm out there and I'm looking for who's in defend mode and who's in discover mode. And what kind of things do I need to do to get the team together to get them in discover mode? It's not that hard. You create a new.
What are some examples of that?
Now, the one Atul Gawande calls it the activation phenomenon. I've talked about that before, the checklist manifesto. Just standing in a circle before you start work for 3 minutes and just restating your role and any concerns, you create an engaged discussion. Tan Lee from Neurogeneration, when you're making eye contact, they did with EEG headsets, they determine your brain waves synchronize. And then if you're listening to an orchestra and all of a sudden one instrument plays out of tune, it's easy to pick out.
Yeah.
But when they're tuning up, it's chaos.
Yes.
And right now, a lot of our workforce is chaos. This guy's pissed off. This guy's hungover. This guy's got an addiction problem. I'm not blaming anybody for these things. Frankly, our industry has created these things. So today's the first day, the first chance you have to change tomorrow, right now. So right now, if we just started doing that simple thing, 3 minutes a day to test, evaluate, and see what happens, where we resynchronize after we sign the job brief, for example, just one thing, right? There's a whole bunch of things we could do, Kate, but what we need to do is create a connection, right? And the other thing, what we're defending often doesn't need to be defended. Everyone owns their beliefs. You can be Muslim, I can be Catholic. I'm not trying to, it's been said, treat others how you want to be treated. That's not true. It's treat others how they want to be treated. If you were a Muslim and I'm a Catholic, why would I want you to be treated like me, like a Catholic, right?
Let me ask you a question. And I know you're not a big train and retrain and all this kind of stuff, but is there something that, for larger companies who want to focus on something like this, where they could implement some kind of management, leadership training to help people out with how to do this kind of stuff? Because all the ideas and the techniques that you have are super interesting. And I haven't implemented them obviously, but they seem like things that could work. But it's how do you disseminate all of this to everyone and get them, all of the leaders on kind of the same page? You know what I mean? When you work in a large company.
First thing you should do is you get all your leaders in the room and you don't label anything leadership training.
Okay.
Because you've biased it right there, right?
Yeah.
And now you're coming in with, Raphael Leto Wilkins talks about making assumptions. Once you steer part of your brain into a certain belief pattern, it already fills in the blanks for you. So what the little things that I'm doing, matter of fact, I just sent a bunch of these cards that I use to Australia. I know they're trying it in England and in Canada. And so the little spots around the country now are starting just to test, evaluate, and see. It's not this little card that I hand out that has red flag words on one side in it. Basically, it says, at such and such a company, the card says, with their logo on it, such and such a company, we listen to and share concerns because a concern is a prediction of an unwanted outcome. It's a core value. And if we can convince everybody to test this core value out for at least a month, and then come back, weekly written feedback, see what happens if they do this exercise. And then they come back at the end of the month to see if they value it. If I could call that some big thing and make it a leadership program and all this stuff, but if I just ask, hey, just try this, and I want you to test it, I'm going to have somebody there to help foster it because it's something new and you won't do it unless we're there because you're patterned, right?
Well, and that's sort of what I was getting at. It's if we're all in these patterns, how do we break the pattern to introduce something new in a way that's effective throughout?
So it's not the card. It's not the card that does it. The card is just a piece of cardboard. It's that 3-minute process, getting someone to foster it, like you just mentioned. So it happens every day. So this means management may have to cancel one of their very important meetings they have you know, how important all those meetings are that you go to, and actually designate people to show up on the job site for the job brief once a week, which means now it's much easier for the management guy to go show up in the sharp end's job brief than it is for somebody from the sharp end to peel off and go to that management meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That ain't happening. That,
Mhm.
I don't say, but that's the vernacular for me today.
That's okay. It's in the dictionary. I guess it's technically a
Right.
word.
So these small things, so the process that you're going through to create this gets people in a circle, engaged, discussing current things that are about to happen in real time, not the imaginary check boxes that you say, I got to be careful, it slips, trips, and falls, and look out for the pinch and the bite, and what source control do I need to look at? That's all predictive and really good. But the most important thing is what's happening immediately next.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get in a circle, we start connecting at a way that you'll start to see the synchrony. And then if you're there as a management personnel and somebody shows up, like I had this happen, and a field crew coordinator showed up that nobody liked. And these guys are humming. They're whistling. They're up in the, there's like 6 guys in the air moving, and it looks like like an orchestra. And all of a sudden, so you hear, oh man, here comes Ed. Crap. Right? Oh no, not that. So they use a few extras.
Yeah.
No, now here he comes. Jeez, I can't believe he showed up. You know, whatever synchrony they were in just got shattered like glass. If you can start to recognize that the leadership principle that I'm talking about is synchrony,
Mm-hmm.
then you'll pull them back together. Let's pull back together. Let's just restate where we are, any concern we have, and realize, well, Ed doesn't control what we do. We do, right? And if there's an incident, no investigation is going to blame it on Ed.
Mm-mm.
I'll point the finger at us. Why didn't we use whatever safety rule, right? So to me, if we make it as complex as a leadership training program, we give it a stigma. What we want to do is just do things that actually create the outcome we want. If I change the temperature, it snows, right? Somebody tells me about sparkling mineral water in Texas, and I bring it to Saranac Lake. The people picking up that sparkling mineral water that didn't have it there before have no idea how it got there.
Mm-mm.
It's all invisible to them. See what I'm saying? Does that
I do.
Yeah.
It all makes sense. So Bill, we've been, kind of chatting about this for a little while now. What is it that you want to say or get across before we close out this episode? What do you want to say to the people who are listening about important takeaways from our conversation?
So safety is a product of the environment we create. 1. 2, I hear the word accountability all the time. You need to be accountable. And I've asked people, I do social experiments all over the country. Nobody knows I'm doing it. But I ask, hey, can you give me your definition of accountability? I probably have as many definitions of accountability as I do people I've asked. But if we create an engaged, connected, communicable, good communication and competent workforce, they become accountable to each other.
And yes, that's key right there. It's not even about like the hierarchy. It's not even about like employee versus employer. It's literally the people who are your peers.
When we have a team, aligned team, I have that thing that I do. I got you, right? Because your brain is your conscious brain acts on small affirmations. I'm going to brush my teeth. You do. I'm going to go talk to Kate on a podcast. I'm here. I'm going to go drink some sparkling mineral water. I do. Well, every little affirmation you tell your conscious brain to do, its job is to do everything you tell it. So if at work, you're about to go to work and you're up in the bucket and I say, hey, Kate, I got you. You're going to smile.
Yeah.
And and then you say, I got you. Or if I don't say, you go up and you say, hey, you got me? And then you stop. We create an affirmation of accountability between us. Those 3 words, right? We use them elsewhere. But what we've done is we've created division and layers because it's a social hierarchy. I'm the foreman. And if you hear somebody say, I'm the foreman, that's defend mode. If you're the foreman, you don't have to tell me, right? I'm a paramedic. I've been out there. I'm the paramedic. I'm the doctor. I'm the nurse. And I know I navigated that field for 23 years, knowing that they're in defend mode. And what I have to do is acknowledge to make them feel better about themselves so I can move forward. Because I don't care who they are, really. My priority is the patient.
Yeah.
The person.
And that's important. Keeping also your focus on what is the actual priority? What's the goal here?
So in physical reality, the work we do, that power line you're about to build with the tools that we're all sharing, the tools and the power line that you're building live in physical reality. They don't care who's in charge. They don't care what we think. And those injuries we suffer are all the same, regardless of what level you are, what your social belief is, whether you don't like that guy. Or I did one recording, Kate, and I had a shirt with something said on it, and I got a comment from somebody. As soon as I saw what it said on your shirt, I stopped listening. My shirt didn't know that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
My shirt had nothing to do with anything. And now he won't see the sparkling mineral water because he didn't want to listen because of something my shirt said.
Yeah.
And that's where we are in our industry and in our society. And I think we can do better. I think if we focus on the 3 C's, communication, connection, and competency, we focus on those 3 things, we'll start to see safety as a result. But remember, the event that doesn't happen because of that, we can't measure or manage it because we aren't even aware of the things that don't happen when we create the writing. And that's what I mean. Rather than prevent those things from ever happening again, I'd love to start preventing them from ever happening at all.
I know. Agreed. Yeah, this is great. It is always such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for your time and your insight today. I also want to thank all of our listeners for spending their valuable time with us. And I invite you to join me and Bill again soon for our next episode of Influencing Safety. In the meantime, stay safe and be well.
Join us for the IPI Forum, a monthly event designed for utility safety and ops professionals. Each session brings expert insights on industry topics, trends, and best practices from leaders like David McPeak and Jim Vaughn. Register once and stay connected to a network of peers, ready to share knowledge and solutions. Don't miss this free opportunity. Secure your spot today and earn 1 certification point. Visit ip-institute.com to learn more and register.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Utility Business Media and its employees. It is strongly recommended that you discuss any actions or policy changes with your company management prior to implementation.